Good morning. And welcome. It's wonderful to be back up here. Am I still on?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Welcome. And as Brian often says, and I want to echo this morning as well, we are an open, loving, welcoming community. Whoever you are, wherever you've been, wherever your life journey has taken you, you are welcome here with open hearts. And so, good morning.
Good morning.
I want to point out again that we have elected something different this year. Oftentimes, the centers choose their topics, and from time to time, some centers have sort of worked together on a set of topics for the year. And for the first time ever, I keep wanting to say national, but we're really international, organization has elected a theme. And it is really more than just a theme for the year. It is part of our vision and mission in the world, and that is a global vision that is a world that works for everyone. So we've always been about awakening humanity to its spiritual magnificence. And we are adding to that now in service of creating a world that works for everyone. Now, the theme for this month has to do with kinship with all life. And our theme for today is so right and perfect because this is so close to my heart. It is the theme of interconnectedness of all life, the oneness of all life. And I have found personally that this has been the common thread and the central core of my spirituality, my spiritual path, and what I'm about in this world. And we hear this often. We truly hear this often, and we speak it out, and yet I think there's room to grow into understanding this oneness of all life, the interconnectedness, and also stepping into it, living it forward in the world. So we know this, we've been learning this spiritually, and we've been learning this biologically. I don't think we're that far off in the timeline of human history, in the Western world at least. Let's say that. Let's clarify it. In the Western world, I don't think we're that far off from this being a novel idea that we're interconnected, that all life is one. We hear it echoed through the concept of Gaia, the earth as being one system, and every part of the earth is interrelated and interconnected and symbiotic. And yet, that's sort of novel. And we have this conflict going on, this conversation throughout the world about climate change. And here is another sample. There's so many of them in which we have this idea of interconnectedness, and yet we don't. Some of us are on board with it, and some of us aren't. And I think that also is true in the spiritual life. We embrace the idea of universality, of oneness, oneness of being through God as the Creator. And yet I know there's a part of us, each and every one of us in some way, that is open to growing into this more profoundly than we have been before. So let's go over a few of our basics. We believe that there is one power, one presence that is the source and substance of all creation, the source, that original cause that created everything. And yet it is infinite and it is eternal. That sounds like a paradox. But there is something we believe that exists that is more than we are, more than what we see through all creation in the world. That it precedes us, and yet we are it in expression. That it is embodied, it has embodied itself in all creation, and yet it is not consumed by that. And what we mean by that is it didn't use itself up. That what we see here on planet Earth and see the moon and the stars and so forth, that's not the totality of it, that it is far beyond that. And it stretches our mind to a point where we can't really take that in. But we know that something is more than us. And we, as religious scientists, believe that that something, in its purest essence, that its infinite wisdom, its absolute power, is that of unconditional love. That God is love, that we are created of love, we are God in expression, and therefore we are one with this one, and that oneness in its purest essence is love. But we also subscribe to the idea of free will. And we know that we believe, as religious scientists, that God is creative, that thought is the creative impulse, and we have a creative process which translates that non-visible thought, feeling, into form. And so when we say that God is all that is and God is all that matters, that is really code for saying the creative process. God is everywhere. God is in all creation. God is us. As we think, we invoke that creative process that is God. And through that creative process, that which is non-physical comes into form. And so when we sing our thoughts, our prayers, and we are always praying, we accept that as the profound truth of life. And so it always comes back to, what am I thinking, what am I feeling? Now, when we look at each other, do we look like each other? No. And that's one of the first lessons we have, that we can be one and still be different. When we look in the world, do all trees look alike? Does every point of creation look alike? No. And so we have this tremendous model from the point of birth forward. You know, we live in this environment in which there is so much diversity. It's diversity of appearance, it's a diversity of purpose, and yet it all works together. And so that is first and foremost one of the first principles of life. Life is love, and life has diversity in this dimension that we happen to be living in. Now, I also want to mention that, and this goes back to Reverend Morrissey. I love this. This is one of my mantras. She says, we need to remember that everything is created twice. First in thought, and then in form. And this, again, echoes this idea that our thoughts, our feelings are creative impulse that invokes that creative process that brings the non-physical into form. And so everything is created twice. And it always brings us back to that same point. What are we thinking? What are we feeling? What are we creating? Is that what we want to be saying yes to? And is that what we want to be experiencing? So we know this works at the individual level, and we practice it at the individual level. And that's where we take responsibility, is at the individual level. And yet we live in this world in which there are other points of creation than just ourselves. I remember before I came into this center and into this teaching, I used to go to bookstores, to the New Thought section, in the spirituality section, and there were all these books. And I kept thinking, where's the tribe? You know, I'm not the only point of creation here. The publishers don't create books just for me. And so I knew intuitively there are others out there, and here we are. Thank goodness I found you. So I'm referring to notes today because I really want to be clear on these foundation ideas before I talk more generically or more fully in the world about oneness and interconnectedness. The other thing that is really important for us to understand is we've been learning this through this teaching. We are practicing metaphysicians. And yet this works only to the extent that we subscribe to it. It's working. It's working in default. Let's be clear. Remember Rule 52, page 52. It's always working. Always. But in terms of being masters of the ship, in terms of really being the captain of the ship of our own life, it's working to the extent that we are consciously aware of it, consciously employ it, and subscribe to this process of life. And that's where we have some work to do, because each and every one of us is also human. We've been imprinted by the culture. We've been imprinted with other thoughts. Most of us did not start out in this teaching, and so we have overlays. So many different overlays. Some of them are family, some of them are spiritual from other traditions, some of them are based on experiences and the stories we told ourselves about them, and from the culture at large, in which we have this incredible culture of media, which connects us in so many ways, but also has a way of putting a lot of memes and thought forms out there, and we can be susceptible to those as well. So part of it is trust, part of it is where we are putting our focus, and part of it is to what extent do I really understand this, get this, embody this, empower this, and walk this. So now let's look at the world a little bit, because all of this gets to be a bit confusing. Now, we've been talking and joking about, do we all look like each other, and do we look like other points of creation? And how is it, we seem to have this paradox, this fundamental duality of, we say that there's oneness, and we're all interconnected, and yet everything looks different. So let's think of snow, for example. There's a snowfall. And we look out and we see snow. And yet, what is snow? It is the accumulation of individual flakes. And what do we know scientifically? Each and every one of those flakes is unique. We all have fingerprints as humans. And yet, we have learned that each and every one of us has a unique constellation of pattern in our fingerprints. And so there are so many models out there in which we know that there is this uniformity, I don't want to use the word uniformity, unity, not uniformity, unity, and oneness, and yet diversity. So I pose this question to you. Where is your fear point about really embracing that concept of oneness and diversity? Are we afraid of losing our individuality? Does the tree at the riverbank moan to the fish, why am I not a fish? No. The tree is a tree in itself. It has its form, its beauty, its purpose, its role in life, as does the fish. The tree is stationary, planted in the earth, and exposed to the sun, and creating oxygen. And yet the fish is embedded in water, and it moves, and it consumes oxygen. They are so very different, and yet they are part of that oneness of all life. And they don't bemoan that they're not the other. They are whole and complete in and of themselves, and understand that divinity of who they are, and the purpose and role that they bring to life. Now we have another profound model, and I love this. How many of you are aware of Bruce Lipton? And have read Biology of Belief? And he brings forward, he sort of woke us up. He was another one of these voices that just, amped it up and expanded our awareness of life and body and who we are and how we operate. And one of the things he said is, our human body is this incredible model for us of diversity working in oneness. And how all those different organisms that we are, just even on the cellular level, we have cells that are differentiated, that serve different purposes. And as they colonize to form to come together as a form in the body. They have a form and a function. So a liver cell may not be like a kidney cell and so forth. And yet it is all part of the same body. And we know that we're also a very multi organization body, in the sense that we are made of bacteria and all sorts of living organisms. We're not just cells. And we are a host to, we are like the United Nations in our physical body, right? That's what we are. But it's more than United Nations. It's more like a galactic, in Star Wars, when you go into the cantina and you see all this different forms. But we're in our own body, right? Yeah, we are. And yet somehow, when we are in balance and in harmony and agreement, we are in a healthy form. And everything is clicking and working together, despite what it looks like, despite what its purpose is, right? And it's honoring, because it's all part of that bigger whole. We are that walking, breathing, living sample of what life can be in harmony and oneness, despite the diversity. But, then let's say there's a disagreement, because we see this happening in the outer world, where there's a disagreement. And we think, well, it's okay if I kidnap you and sell you into slavery. It's okay if I make money by polluting the waters. It's okay if I tamper with the genetic structure of food for profit. It's okay if I do these things. But let's take it back to our body. That would be like saying, well, I really favor this hand, so it's okay if I cut this one off. If I have a point of disease in my body, do I ignore it for something else? What happens when we do that with our body? Everything breaks down, right? And so if we sort of take that look and map it out to the world, that gives us an entirely different sense of being God in expression. A God that is creator, a God that is love embodied through its creation. If there is that love, then when something is festering, we don't ignore it. We marshal our immune system, right, to go and help out and quell that inflammation. So let's talk about our immune system for a second. Our immune system in our biological body, for example, and I'm not a medical scientist, but I do know that we have a receptor, for example, for vitamin D. And we have receptors for those types of molecules that support and amplify our immune system to be effective when it is called upon to support our health. And if we don't have enough vitamin D, that receptor is open, and that receptor can match up with some other things, but those other things don't work the same way in helping the immune system out. And I think if we look at ourselves as human beings, we definitely have receptors for love, don't we? And when love isn't present, when we're not mindfully present with love, what do we seem to connect up with? We seem to be susceptible. Our spiritual immune system can be susceptible to distrust, fear, anger, all sorts of things. And so I like to think about, where's my spiritual immune system as a human being, as a point of sentient life on this planet, and recognizing that there are many forms of sentient life on this planet. There are many places of consciousness in this realm of creation that we live in. I'm going to inject something here that's intrigued me for a long time, but I think it fits into part of this idea of oneness and being the presence of love. Bear with me on this. Several years ago, I read Caroline Mace's book, Sacred Contracts. And the focus of that book, I find this true with a lot of her books. She has a theme for the book, and then I find there is a small section in it that just blows my mind, and that is the meat of the whole book for me. So, in Sacred Contracts, she talks about archetypes. And an archetype is a constellation, it's sort of like a type, sort of like a persona that represents aspects of herself. So somebody who teaches has a teacher archetype, for example, mother archetype, father archetype, and so forth. And she says most of us as humans have about 12 archetypes that define us overall. But she said for the human race, we share 4 archetypes in common. And this is what blew me away. And here are the four archetypes we all share. This means they are present and active within us to some degree all the time. Child. Well, that's a given. We were all born into this earth and we were all children at some point. But some of us had a talented childhood, and some of us had a really wonderful childhood, a happy, loving childhood. And there are some of us who had a wounded childhood, an abandoned child, and so forth. So we have child that we share, but our flavors of child differ. And even within ourselves, we may have multiple aspects of child. And that is always present as part of us. Now, the second one we all share is victim. We all have victim going on at some level until we've done enough inner work that we've released that. The third is prostitute. Not the woman who's selling her body on the street, but prostitute in the sense of what do we, what's the word I'm looking for? What do we give up? What do we sacrifice? How do we capitulate to foster our survival? So what is it that we say, all right, I feel pressed and I'll give this up because I think this is what's going to foster my survival. And we all, we do have that connotation of how am I prostituting myself, or in the work environment and so forth. Where am I selling myself short, for approval, for the raise, for whatever. And the fourth that we all share is saboteur. And that is how we victimize ourselves. Now, when we think out to the world and think that each of us has this going on to some extent, that is part of the fabric of our life. Some people are acting that out more than others, and some of us are saying, all right, let's do that healing work, that inner work, and really come back to knowing that our divinity, our source, is that we are born of perfection, that we are divine, and that we are beings of love and expression. And yet, I think for me, what these 4 archetypes have helped me to do is to step back from judgment, to step back from criticism. Because it's like, all those strong connotations out there of good and evil and right and wrong and should and shouldn't do. And yet, when I think about all of this going on within each and every one of us on the face of this planet, it's sort of like, okay, we're all on a journey that is an evolutionary journey, that is a healing journey. And so these are ways in which we disconnect from that oneness of life. That oneness of life where if we are one with God, we are, let's put it this way, and we've said this before, but I want to repeat this. What's true of God is true of me. What's true of God is true of us. And again, that depends on the level to which we really accept, allow, embody, and subscribe to that. And we all have our own work in our own immune system that helps bring us to that inner wholeness of being, so that we can be living that wholeness and oneness with each other. In our outer world, we see this projected at a whole nother level. We do know that whatever is going on in our life is a reflection of our consciousness. If we look at it individually, where we are today is the sum total, right, of everything we have thought, felt, believed up until this point, and how we have taken action on it. And sometimes the way we've taken action on it is to react as a victim, to prostitute ourselves, to sabotage, but we don't have to continue to do that. We can see ourselves in another light and step into that wholeness of being. And when we see that, right now what we're seeing in the world is we're seeing this amped up, amplified on steroids. And there was something I watched this week that really characterized this. It was Barbara Marx Hubbard, and she was filmed in this little clip, and she was asked, it was the movie One, I was watching. And one of the questions, it was a crew of people who had this inspiration to do a movie about oneness of life. And they were not movie makers, they were rank amateurs. They did a very good job though, however. And they were amazed that through this project, through this inspiration, through their belief in this and the power of their vision, they were able to access a number of notable spiritual leaders from a number of different spiritual traditions, and also other notable thinkers. And one of them happened to be Barbara Marx Hubbard. And the question they posed to all of the people they interviewed was, without speaking, just sort of act out what you see as the state of the world. And so that was an unusual question to pose to everybody. And they all had different ways of showing it. And Barbara Marx Hubbard did this, which is two converging lines going downward and then sort of fanning out, exploding. And then she did this, two converging lines pointing upward, and at the point they meet, voila. And so the team was interviewing, and they were curious. It's like, well, help us interpret this. What does this mean? And she said, well, we simultaneously have all the contradictory and negative and problematic thoughts and ways converging, and it's like a spiral down. In essence, it's a slippery slope until they meet, and everything sort of crumbles and disintegrates. And she said, at the same time, simultaneously, we have all that is uplifting and emergent coming together, transforming the world, to the point that it coalesces. And I think that's something true, and we see that so profoundly in this country, in this election cycle, and what's going on. Now, we can take issue with some of these people, but maybe let's take another look at them. What if they are the catalyst to bring up to light what's festering within our culture, so that we can, if we choose to, be the ones to help heal this, to be the ones that bring this into an emergence that transforms and transmutes, rather than takes it further downward. But it calls on us to be conscious co-creators in the process. It calls on us to be in that vibration of love, celebrating the interconnectedness of life, seeing the value and divinity in each other, and stepping beyond those four archetypes which can be problematic, and really working together through prayer, through meditation, through all sorts of practices, but coming together in oneness of being. through the power of word and our prayer, through our sacred acts, to bringing that emergence into that which comes together and can transform. So the power is ours. The power is in our thought, and yet we are all one. You know, there is so much in the Western tradition and Western faith which is about a rescue operation. And, you know, the Western Christian faith has a tendency, they have a belief that we were born in sin, that we are imperfect, and that we need to believe in someone greater to save us. It's a rescue operation. And what we really believe in this tradition, and I invite us to go even deeper in this, is we are shifting it from rescue, from being a victim that needs to be rescued, to being the one, to being into that responsibility, co-creational responsibility, where we each take that responsibility in oneness, in love, in unity, and bring forth a healing consciousness within the world. And that's like connecting our spiritual immune system to the love that helps heal the world for everyone. So I ask you to join me in this affirmative prayer. As we breathe in, God is. As we breathe out, I am. As we breathe in, God is. As we breathe out, we are. For we know that there is one power, one presence. It is the source and substance of all creation. And we know that that presence is everywhere, in every moment, in every point of creation, in every condition. And we know that we are part of this creation. That means that God is me, God is us, God is all that is expressing through us. And so today, and from this moment forward, we more fully recognize the I am that we are. That as we think, we create, and so we choose magnificent, uplifting, emergent, healing, loving ideas. We see and we feel within us the beauty of all creation, the promise that is there. And as we accept this, embody this, and choose to live this forward in life, we know that life becomes this. As we hold the high watch of this truth, embody this divinity, we know that we are collectively in oneness, in the interconnectedness of all life, creating this truth so that it is truth for others. Not that we are pushing that, we're not doing that at all. We are simply out of that bountiful flow that is life force, that is love, choosing that as our truth. And as we do so, that is the work, where we release everything else unto that law that creates this wonderful truth of love in all creation. We let go of any need to see the result. We let go of any need to be the actor. We let go of any taunting on this. We simply know that there is this eternal, profound truth. We embody it. We know it's healing, expansive, evolutionary, wonderful. magnificence within our lives, and as we do this collectively as a resident group, and even as we repeat this individually throughout our own days, we know that this is our work, this is our purpose, this creates a world that works for everyone. A world that is love expression, in oneness, in justice, not injustice, but with justice for all, with equality, with beauty, with truth, with joy. And so we celebrate this. We celebrate this and we choose this as our work, as our blessed calling and life. And with grateful hearts, we say yes to this calling. With grateful hearts, we say thank you. And let us be knowing it is done. And so it is.
And so it is.